Hello everyone, and welcome back to this new edition of Beyond the Board. So here we have PinkBatman from the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX Rando community. So how would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody, my name is PinkBatman. You can find me on Twitch at pink_batman12. And yeah, I do consider myself a variety streamer that speedruns Link's Awakening DX, and I do a lot of randomizers for LADX as well.
How have you gotten into Link's Awakening DX speedrunning then?
Well, I first started watching a lot of GDQ. There was a hotfix episode of Random Number Generation earlier last year where they showcased the randomizer for this game. At the time, I was really big into playing randomizers for various games, and it was a game that I had played a lot of as a kid. It was one of the first ones I actually ever had growing up on my old Game Boy Brick. And so when I discovered the existence of the randomizer, I was like, I have to learn how to play this. So I joined the community. They were all super helpful and helping me get back into locating my own copy for the game, finding the resources necessary to get the randomizer started. And there was a point where I just kind of started joining in on the weekly races they had in the randomizer community, and I learned a bit more from those guys as well. And after a couple months, I was convinced to actually start speedrunning the base game itself by one of the other rando runners, which actually makes this my very first speedrunning game.
What is your favorite aspect of speedrunning Link's Awakening, and why?
I believe my favorite aspect of Link's Awakening is just how insanely broken this game truly is. There is so much you can do, even in the base game, to just completely go beyond the normal boundaries of what you would normally find playing it casually. And in a lot of cases, these are just super easy tricks to perform. And even despite all the glitches I already know, it still feels like I'm learning new glitches, new ways to break the game, which is actually really ironic because I'm not usually a huge fan of playing games with major glitches or exploits. But with Link's Awakening DX, it's very different. It still feels like you are enjoying the game despite, absolutely breaking it over your knee. Well, a lot of games that have major glitches, you're typically just vaulting over large portions of the game, some of which are, in some cases, the most enjoyable aspects of the game casually. I specifically run the no woob category, which is no world warp, no out of bounds. In that category, you are still going to every single dungeon. You're still doing almost all the dungeon. You're just doing it in a way that lets you go fast. So you're still getting to enjoy the entirety of the game. You're just doing it at a much faster pace, but you're still able to still play the entire game, if that kind of makes sense. So yeah, we're breaking the game, but we're still enjoying the majority of what the game has to offer as well.
In what aspects is Link's Awakening DX Rando the most challenging or engaging? Is it in routing, execution, or something else?
I would say the most challenging aspect of playing LADXR Bingo would most certainly be the routing involved. I've been playing this game for a little over a year now, and even still, it can be very easy to just kind of forget certain checks in the game because they're very out of the way, or you might forget a check that has a very specific item requirement, and this happens a lot when you're trying to go fast in a randomizer as well. Missing some of these checks can actually very easily become the difference in a race between having a commanding lead and then just completely failing, and I've had a lot of races go that way for myself personally. The best way to kind of overcome these challenges are just practice. If you lose a race because you didn't go and check this one location, next time you race you'll be like, well, I gotta remember to go check this location next time. We do allow the use of map trackers when we're racing. Most of us don't use them, kind of like a gentleman's agreement that it's like, yes, we have the ability to do it, but we don't want to, kind of. But if you're playing it casually though, no one's going to care if you use a map tracker. It's a good way to kind of learn how to play the game.
I find it intriguing back from when we saw the game at Bingo-thon Winter 2021 that the bingo card was generated within the game and not via Bingo Sync. So I wanted to ask, is there a particular reason why it is done that way instead of traditionally? Is there more stuff you'd like to mention about that particular system, so to speak?
As far as the reason why we prefer to use the in-game bingo card as opposed to Bingo Sync is mostly pedantic. It's very, very quality of life. It's one less window we have to have on the desktop. Every time we have to click outside of the screen, we have to click back inside of the screen to get the game to play again with our controllers. It's all very, very small things. I would say the one major aspect to having that bingo card be in the game, though, is that when you get your bingo in game, you don't have to go beat the game. You don't have to just kind of sit there and say, I got the bingo, I'm done, and then just kind of like sit there in the middle of an enemy filled screen and say, oh, that's it, I'm done. It does kind of add a sense of finality to it, because once you've got your bingo, you do still have to make your way back home or make your way to the egg and check the bingo board, and then it does a credits warp. So it does kind of apply that firm sense of finality. It's like, okay, that's it, this is the end of the game. And then it'll even give you, an official in-game time and some final stats as well for those interested in knowing like how many checks you got in the game out of however many checks there were. So I would say that's the biggest part of having the bingo board be in the game that makes it a little bit nicer, is it does kind of apply more of a finality to your seed.
What is it for you that constitutes a fun and engaging goal versus one that you think may need some rebalancing?
Really, the only time I've ever actually considered a goal that would be in need of rebalancing is if the existence of that goal directly counters the collection of another goal. So, like, have one spot on the bingo board say, have this item in your inventory, but then have another bingo spot in even the same row or column say, trade away that item, which would in turn cancel out the original spot, which was an issue when the bingo board first came into play. So, like, in Link's Awakening DX, you get a mushroom to get powder normally in the base game. So in the randomizer, we find the mushroom, and then we still trade it away to the witch, and she gives us another random item. However, these can both end up being bingo board spots, have the mushroom and trade the mushroom for the witch's item. And if you trade the mushroom away, it takes away your mushroom trade item. You could just go get another mushroom from the forest after that, but it does feel a little funky doing it that way. And there have been other goals, especially trade quest goals, that have that same thing, but it becomes a more permanent thing. Like if you use a glitch to skip getting a certain item of the collection sequence, and then you try to go back and get that item, like it doesn't count. So that can break a bingo board sometimes, but the DADES has been working on, fixing those issues as they come up. But otherwise, most of the goals do require you to consider different routing options when you're playing, especially goals like the picture goals, which you do have to go out of your way to collect. So I would say what kind of makes that more fun and engaging is that goals in this style do sometimes lead to very close races, where in the end, it comes down to speed, routing, and execution before the final say and, who's going to be the winner. So it could be like, oh, I just need to find 900 rupees, and my opponent is going for a goal where they have to complete the trade sequence. Who can do that faster?
When it comes to routing, what are the aspects of it perhaps that most people usually do not think of? And are there any mistakes in the thought process behind routing that people can do to damage their potential, for example? And what do you think then could they do to improve?
I did kind of touch on this a little bit earlier, but there are going to be oftentimes, especially when you're going fast, that you may become completely stuck because you forgot the location of a check that you wouldn't normally check in like 80% of the seeds you run. Or it could be like you're trying to full clear an area and there's one check you can't check in that area just because you don't have this one specific item. But then when you do get that specific item, you're so excited because it unlocks everything else in the game that you just totally forget that you never completed that dungeon early on or gotten that check early on. It's very easy to do this in a race, and so trial and error honestly is the biggest part of getting through a seed like that. You play multiple seeds. If you get stuck, if you forget a check, you find out later, because you can always generate a spoiler log with the seed you generate. So if you get hopelessly and truly stuck, you can always check to see where you are and be like, oh yeah, I forgot to go check that thing 2 hours ago, or however long you've been. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah. And then also, use a map tracker if you're just doing it casually, especially if you don't really know what you're doing. It can definitely help you kind of find those checks that are easy to forget, or that you might forget to come back to later on.
Do you often feel overwhelmed sometimes with how many more possibilities you have when you get a certain item and you feel, okay, where to start?
Oh gosh. Usually the one item that really opens up the game that you always have to find somewhere early on is the power bracelet. Power bracelet locks out like half of the entire world. Like you literally cannot access the second half of the world without the power bracelet. And so if you find the power bracelet and then 2 seconds later you find like the flippers that let you swim, and then another 2 seconds later you find like your sword and you're able to climb the mountain. If you find all these, items that are just very large gates to certain certain checks, it can be sometimes very overwhelming. It's like, well, I've got all these great items, but now I've got like 200 checks I need to check at the same time. It can be a little overwhelming trying to figure out, okay, so which way do I go next? Do I go over here? Do I make maybe a ballsy play and go over here? Again, trial and error, practice makes perfect. Once you start kind of learning the game, learning the map, it becomes a little bit easier to be like, okay, well, I could check here, but there's only like 2 checks here, so maybe I'll go check here first because there's like 10 checks here.
Hello everyone! Just a quick interruption to remind everyone that all the Beyond the Board interviews are fully recorded as well on the articles that are up on our website. There is usually a bunch of exclusive content that is not covered in the videos, such as fun tidbits, more insights on the board, and more. So remember to check out the website if you're interested in hearing more about what our guest or guests have to say. With that said, let's keep it going! When looking at the goals on your card, what kind of factors make you think, okay, this is a row I want to go for, and which ones make you say, I am not going for that one?
So usually if you see a row or column that has nothing but instruments or items that don't normally provide progression to a seed, like powder upgrade or, picture goals, those are usually the last ones I'm going to consider getting. Typically I'm looking for rows that have major progression items that open up large portions of the map, like the flippers or the power bracelet, or, just easy to achieve goals in general, like having a certain rupee count or beating certain bosses or mini bosses that I know I can find pretty easily. I would say a majority of the bingo seeds I actually just completely ignore the bingo board in the beginning, and I just kind of go for a little bit. Once I get to a point, I've collected a couple progression items, I've got a few different decisions on where I want to go. At that point, I'll go back to the bingo board and see, what goals have I already gotten? What am I close to? What's going to be the next play based on what I have on my bingo board?
So it's interesting though, you mentioned that you don't really care that much about the card at the beginning. So is it, for instance, you get the card reveal and then you just look at it just to get an idea of what the goals are, but without necessarily routing? Is that what you mean?
Kind of. So in the beginning of the game, when you first start a bingo seed, we actually don't get to see the card right away. We press start on the seed, and the first thing we do is we wake up in bed. We don't actually get to see the bingo card until we go to the back of the starting house and look at that big blue thing on the wall, and that's when we have the card revealed to us, essentially. So we have no idea what possible end goals we'll be going for right away. However, we do know that, even if we do check that board right away, 90% of the time it's going to be impossible to figure out which way should I go first, just because, without those progression items, there's not really a whole lot of options you can do in the first place. The first item in the game is always going to be talking to Terran in your starting house. So if we talk to Terran and he gives us a power bracelet, maybe in that situation, we might check the bingo board right away, because this is already like, well, now I have half the world already opened up to me. Maybe I'll check the bingo board and maybe they'll give me a better idea of, which way should I go. But generally speaking, most of the time, it is kind of difficult to gauge which goals you're going to go for right away, because you have no idea which way the seed's going to take you. And so getting those progression items do kind of help guide a little bit, because it's like I could look at a bingo board and say, okay, beat this mini boss. Well, that's a very easy to find mini boss. I just have to go to this location and kill him. But then I start collecting items and I don't find any of the items necessary to beat him, but I do get the items necessary to beat a mini boss on the goal that is much further into the game. I could check that board early on and be like, well, I'm going to go for this early boss first, and then get totally screwed over when I realize, well, that's not happening. Now I got to change my whole plan. And in that situation, I might end up behind in a race.
Are there any other aspects of the randomization that are very tricky to deal with? And what are your strategies to handle them?
So at the end of the day, routing does become the most common reason to why a seed may or may not take longer to complete. And it's not just because somebody might not know how to do, glitches and tricks in a game. It can be very easy to get tripped up during certain seeds because, in some cases, you could have a runner who knows all the tricks and glitches in the game, and they might end up taking longer to beat the seed than a guy who does everything vanilla, because the progression of the seed won't necessarily always ask the player to know how to do all these tricks. So like I could be, doing this trick and that trick to skip half the game and get to later parts in the game to try to find good items. But then, another runner who doesn't really know how to do that could just be playing the game as normal and find all the good progression early on. And then I'm falling behind because I don't have that progression to get to the areas I need to. And I should have had that like an hour ago. So if you know what your seed settings are, it is a lot easier to make better routing choices just based on what's available to you at the current junction. Like I could cheat my way into a dungeon very easily, but if I would normally need 4 other items just to access that dungeon, it is very unlikely, that sort of gamble would end up paying off in the long run.
What would you say is the barrier for entry for people who are interested in picking up LADX Rando bingos? And have you got any advice for them?
Yeah, it can be pretty easy to get discouraged to learn any rando. If you're watching someone play a seed and they know how to do all these tricks and glitches, it just makes the run look super difficult. But the nice thing about Link's Awakening DX is that it's a very underrated game in the Zelda series. It's very, very approachable to both those who want to learn how to break the game and those who just want to have a fun, casual experience and not have to worry about the pressure of, I have to know how to do all these things. The game itself is actually very, very user-friendly, if you will. Like I said, it's very easy to get into casually. The best part of the randomizer itself is that there's actually a difficulty setting in the options when you're setting up a seed that kind of dictates what level of knowledge and skill is required to complete a seed, which can be anywhere from casual, which is the easiest difficulty. It'll actually include extra copies of the major progression items in the game, and it won't require any level of tricks or glitches to complete, basically. And then the hardest difficulty, which is the one I like to play the most, is Hell Logic, which basically requires some of the most obscure knowledge and the most difficult to perform tricks and glitches. Those may be required to complete a seed. There are resources available to everybody who wants to play, Link's Awakening DX Randomizer, so you can play and learn at your own pace. Take the time to learn the layout of the game first, maybe even play the vanilla game first, just to kind of learn what the game has to offer. And then once you start feeling comfortable with it, take advantage of the resources, start learning tricks, and, play in higher difficulties.
How do you think the community can further support bingos?
So the Link's Awakening DX Randomizer Discord has a channel specifically for ideas and suggestions for improving, LADXR as a whole. If you're playing the bingo and you come up with new ideas for bingo goals or other mechanics to the randomizer, we'd love to have you stop in and make those suggestions. New ideas can often come from very surprising places. There's no such thing as bad. Well, okay, hold on now. There are such thing as bad ideas, but we're not going to judge you for those unless you're actually trying to be an idiot.
Do you have any final words you'd like to say to the community?
There are a lot of people that actually helped me get to the point where I am today. When it comes to LADX, there's a few names in particular I really wanted to shout out. A big thanks to Xander and Dragon Co. for really helping me get into LADX and LADXR speedrunning in the first place, and learning a lot of the obscure, difficult tricks and glitches that allow you to break this game. I also want to shout out Materia for just being an awesome rival and a friend in the speedrunning community. We've both been doing a lot to kind of push each other while playing this game. Big shout out to Dade for developing and maintaining LADXR in the first place and just keeping the game fresh every month. I also want to thank everyone in my own community and my Twitch channel for hanging out with me during streams and just being cool peoples overall. And then finally, I do want to give a big thanks to you guys, the Bingo-thon community, for welcoming me in and allowing me to showcase this amazing game for the sake of charity.
Aw. Thank you for running. That's what I want to say. In any case, thank you very much to PinkBatman here for participating in this Beyond the Board on Link's Awakening DX Rando. If you're interested in being featured in your own Beyond the Board in the future, you can get in touch with either myself or Floha258, who you can contact by joining the Bingothon Discord. Do make sure, of course, as well to follow PinkBatman on Twitch. And if you're interested in picking up LADX Rando Bingo, you can check out the Link's Awakening Discord, which all will be linked in the description of the video as well as on the article. Of course, remember also that Bingothon Summer 2022, the submissions are open until May 22nd, so definitely get your submissions in. Thank you everyone, and we'll be seeing you on the next Beyond the Board. Bye!
Goodbye!